What's the easiest and most efficient way to move multiple tanks? Stay tuned and you're going to hear from a bunch of experienced YouTubers. What's cracking YouTube? Is me, the Biz, Fishy Biz Aquatics, professional aquatics with the amateur touch, so amateurs, yep, get that professional look. And we are back with another simple fish keeping, the next installation in this series, and with one question and one question only that is posed that I asked earlier to the Allstar panel. And I leave you with this. If you're someone with multiple tanks and you're someone that has to move those multiple tanks, this is the video for you. So you don't only hear from one person, but a plethora of people on the panel. So let's get to it.
I'm Josh from the Aqua YouTube channel. Alright, so the most efficient way of moving multiple tanks, I think probably the first thing I would do is take the water out. They're way heavier if you leave the water in. Moving multiple tanks can be a bit of a pain and a bit stressful, but I think you've got to treat it the same way as just moving one tank. So what I like to do is take any of the hardscape out, any of the stuff that you think might be a little bit brittle or might fall over or whatever while you're trying to actually transport the tank. Remove as much water as you can, but leave some at the bottom and leave your fish there and your plants and your soil or your gravel there. That way you're sort of minimizing the amount of stress that you're putting on the fish. You're just gonna have to take it real simple, real easy. And then that way you can also just put it into its new location and just slowly fill it back up and get things back to normal as quick as possible for the fish. So if you're moving multiple tanks, just one at a time. That's the best way to do it. All right, so if you're looking to cycle a new tank, the best method is if you have another tank. So for example, if you've got one tank set up already and you think you wanna set up a new one, trust me, if you've got one, you'll probably start getting more and more because it's kind of an addicting hobby. A really good way of doing this is even before you buy the tank and everything, buy your new filter. Set up your filter on your existing tank and then run that filter for, I like to try and do it for 3 or 4 weeks, because you're going to build up that beneficial bacteria in all the biological media in that new filter, and it's going to be easy to just then replicate that over to the new tank. When you get your new tank, I'd also like to do a big water change, like 50% on my existing tank, and put that straight into the new tank as well. That way you've got some of that older water there. The bacteria is going to be used to that water. All you need to do is add some more fresh water and then a heater, and you're pretty much cycled, ready to go very quick.
The easiest and most efficient way to move multiple tanks is with multiple friends. Invite them over, have a little pizza, and just have a tank moving party. Now, if you're going to move a tank with fish in it, let's say you want to move it from one part of the living room to another, lower the water level down to about 1 inch and move the whole thing. Try and move the whole thing, the stand and everything. Everybody get in there but don't try and move a tank with water, at 1/4 or more of water, because that water sloshing around can actually weaken the seams, can weaken the silicone and set you up for a tank that's going to burst, and that's no fun. So drain as far as you can. If you're not moving fish around, take all the water out of it, remove the substrate and the decor. That's the best way to move it, ideally. Making sure you don't scratch the tank, But yeah, have some friends come over, and it does take at least 4 people to move a tank like this. You need 4 individuals to be able to get a grip in there and move it. You can also get those moving suction cups. Don't get the small ones. You need the big, large, industrial size. Get about 4 of those, and you attach them to each side, maybe even 6, 2 on each of the longer sides and 1 on each end. They're about this big, and you snap them down, and they really are secure. That's a good way to move it too. If it's acrylic, it's a lot easier to move than glass. Glass is much, much heavier. Myself and one other person moved a 150-gallon acrylic tank. No problem, no problem. It would take at least 4 people to move this. And I mean empty, with all the water and decor out. So It depends a bit on what kind of tank you're moving.
Moving tanks, I've been extremely lucky, and then I've only really had to move a tank a great distance once, and that's when I was going to college. I had a 20 gallon in my home bedroom, and you know, moving up to college. So when I moved that one, I drained the water down maybe about 3/4 of the way, stuck it in my trunk, drove off. When I would stop for gas, I would check. The fish were fine. It had some tetras, corridors, and I think a rainbow shark in it. So again, I was super lucky moving that. Lately, if I move a tank, I'm also lucky because most of my tanks are 5 gallons because they house mostly betas. So if I have to move those, I can, luckily enough, just kind of pick them up and move them, or drain them about halfway and move them. Anything over 20 gallons, you're probably going to struggle moving, especially if you keep the fish in them. So the best thing to do, 5 gallon buckets or the big totes, the big plastic totes, you can put fish in those. Put the fish in those, drain the tanks down, rent a U-Haul or put them in your truck. Just pick the tanks up and put them in the back of the truck. And that's because I don't have much experience with moving a lot of tanks at once. That to me would be the easiest way if you don't have, you know, big strong people that can lift up hundreds of gallons of water. Put some water in some totes or 5 gallon buckets. Put your fish in those. If you want to give them an air stone, go ahead, but they'll probably be fine. Drain the tanks down. You're gonna need to take substrate out too, and then just get 2 guys, one on either end, pick them up and move them. They make the suction cup things, but I've never used those, so I know when I brought the 40 gallon up, my dad and I had to each take an end because I could not lift that myself. So if you're gonna be lifting bigger tanks, definitely get a buddy that can help you move them. Take the substrate out, take the water out, put the fish in a bucket, put substrate in a bucket, and your fish should be fine while you move, and then just reset it all up when you get home to your place.
I'm Ryan, aka the Lucky Schmuck, aka Wild Fish Tanks, aka Fishy Biz's slightly taller, slightly more handsome Fish Fam twin. Today, he asked me to talk to you guys about moving some tanks, so that's what we're gonna do. Specifically, he said moving multiple tanks. Now, he didn't talk about moving tanks across your fish room, across the city, across the country. So we're gonna start small and then get larger. If you're moving tanks from one side of the fish room to the other, or one side of the house to another, or room to room, and you got a bunch to move, I've done it before. You don't have to break down the entire tank. Usually anything like 20 or 29 or lower, I'll just drain it maybe to about a quarter, 25% of the water in there. 2 people, maybe 3 people should be able to move that tank from room to room. You could put it in a car and cover it, and you know, with that 20% water or so, shouldn't be sloshing around too much. You should be okay. I recommend any fish that you do catch out, you can save them with some water in a 5 gallon bucket. I'm using 5 gallon buckets. I'm assuming in 55 gallon tanks and below, you don't have any monster fish that are gonna be too big for a 5 gallon bucket. That way, a lot of times you can keep the substrate in there. Now keep in mind, it's gonna get all sloshed up. You can keep the substrate in there. It's not too heavy with the substrate and a little bit of water. And you can leave most of the fish in there. If you can't get every fish out of the tank, don't worry about it. When you're replacing the water, if you're doing it at the same house, same location, same water, it's gonna be just like a big water change. So it's not that big of a deal. You're moving the tanks, you do a 75% water change, maybe bigger than normal, but not that big of a deal. I recommend you do some research if you are moving them to a different location, even if it is like across town or something. If the water source will be different, I recommend getting an idea of what that water source is. Hopefully it's similar. I usually do like, I fill it in 2s. So I'll go around, I'll take that 25% to like 50% or 60%, okay? And then after a while, I'll wait a little bit, and then I'll take that 60% up to that 100%. So do it like in 2 waves. I'll leave substrate in a 55 gallon, but typically not too much water. You know, and once you get to like a 6-foot tank, your best bet is to take the substrate out of it. They get super heavy. 5-foot tanks, 6-foot tanks, 100 gallons plus. Call some friends. Low and slow wins the race. If you're moving across country, I got nothing for you. Maybe save some of your fish, bring them in buckets, or ship them to yourself across the country. But moving multiple tanks, man, I think it's better just hit the reset button. That's my time. Appreciate you, Biz.
So I really kind of think this is a silly question because everybody knows that the easiest and efficient way for me, as far as moving an aquarium goes, would be to just have John do it. because, yeah, why am I gonna move them, right? But I guess if I had to move an aquarium, I would drain it, and I'm trying to think what John did. Drain it and put the fish in a bucket with the water from the tank, and then I'd put the tank in the back of the truck and move it to where it has to go, and then I'd put water in it and put the fish back in it. It's that easy. I mean, that's the way he makes it look.
Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics. So what is the easiest, most efficient way to move multiple tanks? I'm not sure there's an efficient way. I think if I were moving multiple tanks, what I would do is consider the tank size. If it is a larger tank, everything is going to have to come out. What I mean by larger tank is usually those tanks that are 3 feet or longer. Usually you're going to have to take everything out of those tanks to reduce the weight and reduce the likelihood that something inside that tank is going to break the glass. And so in that case, I would remove everything. If your tank is on the smaller side, let's say a typical nano tank, maybe it's somewhere between 3 to 10 gallons, you might not have to remove everything. In that case, maybe you remove the fish, put them in a separate container with an air stone. The rest of the tank, you can go ahead and usually leave the stuff inside. If you're going to be traveling for a considerable amount of time, sometimes it's best to put saran wrap over the top, spray stuff down, especially if you have live plants. The filter media needs to go inside of water, it needs to be in water, dechlorinated water, so that you can try to keep as much of the beneficial bacteria alive as possible. But that's probably how I would do it if I were moving multiple tanks.
So you want to know about moving tanks? What's the best way to do it? You came to the right place, Biz, because I am the king of moving tanks all the time, almost damn near every year. But the best way to move tanks, that's a two-parter. Let me explain to you what. You could be moving one tank. You're the average fish keeper. Maybe you have 1, 2, maybe 3 aquariums you got to move, which I got the perfect solution for that. Or maybe you're something wrong with you like the rest of us and you have multiple tanks. I'm gonna go both real fast. Buy another tank, run to the new place before you set anything up, set the tank up, use the old media from one of the old tanks, put it in a new tank, and hopefully the new tank that you're getting, whether it be a crisis, maybe it's big enough you can put all the fish in there, if they're all community fish, and then you have plenty of time to move the other stuff. Alright, if you have multiple tanks, well now it's a little bit different. You get yourself a lot of buckets and totes, alright? You get the heaters out of the tanks that you're already using, or if you're gonna put it in a room that's already warm, depending on what time of year it is, you don't need the heaters. You get your air pumps that you got laying around the house, and you put your fish in the buckets and the totes. Now, if you have aggressive fish, you might want to put 1 fish per bucket, because I've done this before where these fish were in a bucket and they eventually, got tight and they started fighting with each other. So if they're aggressive fish, you might want to give them their own bucket. Go ahead and drop an air stone in there. If you're using sponge filters, put the sponge filter in there. Don't clean nothing. Do not clean a thing. Just empty water out so that you already have cycled media to go in these buckets. And then you take these fish in the buckets and totes and you put them in off somewhere. If they have warmth, clean water, aeration, they'll be fine in there. Just the biggest thing you have to worry about is aggression. If you have aggressive fish, community fish, not really an issue. This is the perfect opportunity for you to take that ugly picture that your in-laws gave you. You put that in between the tanks, right? You get that hamper of dirty clothes that you didn't get to wash before the move. You stick those dirty clothes, those dirty drawers and socks, you put them in between so it's not glass on glass. And to be honest with you, if you're not off-roading, the tanks are gonna be fine. They really are. They're not gonna bounce up that much. Maybe lay a old piece of cardboard down so it's not straight. But the thing is you don't want to put too much outside stress in. And some people think, oh, you got to pack it tight on the sides and all that. It's a disaster waiting to happen. Don't smell your tank. Do not smell your tank. When you remove all that water, you start picking it up. The tank is gonna have this aroma, right? The only thing I can kind of equate it to is like fishy business breath. You pick the tank up and you smell it. So try not to breathe in too deeply. Don't try and move a half a tank of water. Do not do it. You think, oh, I want to go ahead and move this tank, but it took me so long to get this all straight and everything, and and I'm only gonna take out some of the water, and it just, I don't have enough time to go over why that is the worst idea. Just don't do it. Don't. And now's a good time to get rid of those fish that you really wasn't fitting your grand scheme. You know, that's one thing you really might want to think about. Don't want to move a fish if you do go through all the extra hassle of moving a fish if you don't plan on keeping it, right? So just go ahead and
let him go.
All right, man, that's enough of the questions, man. You asked too many questions. Just, what about this? What would you do for that?
You, sir, are a hater.
I don't think there's anyone on the internet more qualified to answer the question of how to move tanks than me, because I've moved, I don't know how many hundreds of aquariums from my house to a shop that we had, and then closed the shop and moved them back, and all of this stuff. I've moved hundreds and hundreds of aquariums. The first thing that I would tell you is, whether you're moving 1 or you're moving 12, have a plan. What is the saying? Failing to plan is planning to fail, something like that. You need to have a plan of exactly how you're going to do it, because this is a detailed process. You need to drain the tank, put the fish in something secure, move it, set everything back up, get everything up and running again full of water. It's a lot to do, and because of that, my suggestion would be, I know this is hard, but have a completely separate day to move your aquariums. Someday, Lisa and I are going to move. And when we do, believe me when I tell you, there's going to be multiple weekends that we're going to be moving aquariums. There's no way it can be done the same day you're moving everything else in your house. It's just too much. So we're going to have days set aside specifically for moving aquariums where we don't have to worry about everything else. We get our help there to help us move the tanks. We get that tank done, and then some other time we can focus on the furniture and all of the things. Who cares about all that stuff? We want to make sure the tanks are safe. That's how we're going to do it, and I would suggest that you do the same thing. Even if you only have 1 aquarium, set aside time specifically for that tank, and you're not having to worry about all the other stuff. And that way you can take your time, you're not panicking, and everything will hopefully go smoothly.
Yeah, I don't need no introduction to this. You already know who it is. Bartholomew from Buffalo. Buffalo Fish Tanking, Buffalo Aquatics, Buffalo Soldiers, and activities and entertainment. Look, multiple fish tanks, man, you don't want to move, man. Look, just stay where you at. You feel me? Don't even go nowhere. Leave them joints right there. It is too much, G. Like, I moved a 75, a 60, a 29, a 40. Man, you gotta take a whole, man, it takes time to, you gotta, first of all, you try to move a 40-gallon full of water, you're looking at 468 pounds or better. And you can't move that. Nah. You gotta drain all them joints down. You gotta get some totes from Home Depot. You gotta put them joints in the tote. And then you gotta put you gotta put your sponge filters in there so that your beneficial bacteria stays beneficial. You know what I'm saying? Then you got to make sure that when you get them in the totes that it stays locked down, you know? And then you don't know how many totes you need because it depends on how many fish you got. If you got any aquatic plants, they gotta stay in the water. So you get just another tote for the aquatic plants. Because if they dry out, then you out of plants, B. Get them joints, then what I did is I wrapped it up with some tape. You know, I wrapped up the totes with tape because you just never know. You know, and then I wrapped the fish tanks up. You know, so they'd be easier to carry. And then you got to get them to where you're going. Make sure you get your water in there. Make sure that your sponge filters and your filters stay wet so that you can start that joint back up, get the fish back in there as soon as possible in their new spot, and never move again. All right? Get out of here. And oh yeah, Funk, you keep playing with the biz, man. Me and him, we got something for you, G. I ain't even gonna mess around with you, B. Look, watch your mouth. Alright? That's all I gotta say to it. Now you done or are you finished? Larry, I told you about bringing Bartholomew. Where is he coming from, man? You gotta get this guy out of here, man. He's a nut. And he's always in the video. Well, there you have it. Most of our experienced panel guests, I hope you learned something about multiple tanks and moving multiple tanks in the easiest and most efficient way possible. For another installation of simple fish keeping, I'm the Biz. Go check me out on FishyBizAquatics.com. FishyBizAquatics at Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And as always, the best stuff is the wet stuff. We get at me. Larry! Don't talk back to me, Larry. Listen.